Mark McLaughlin's War and Peace, 7th edition. This game has seen many, many editions since it originally came out back in the day, in the 80s, the 70s. It's an old game, that's for sure. This new edition is printed by Avalon Digital, which is a video game and tabletop studio that is taking classic games and redoing them for the modern day. You may remember I unboxed the French and Indian War game that they published that I am struggling to remember the name of right now. It's not Bayonets and Tomahawks, and it's not Wilderness War, but it was a remake of the game Mohawk. They have a digital version of that. I believe there's going to be a digital version of this, or there already is on Steam, and it's called Napoleon's Eagles, but it's basically the digital adaptation of War and Peace. Mark McLaughlin designed this a long time ago. It is widely loved as a strategic/operational Napoleonic game. It's very big. This box, you can see how big that is right there. Now, you may be familiar with this because there have been, like I said, past editions. Here is the same game, Mark McLaughlin's War and Peace, Game of the Napoleonic Wars. This is by One Small Step, who I believe is defunct now. And this is the 6th edition of the game. And then there was a 5th edition as well, printed by One Small Step. So this is the newest version. There are some new inclusions in this game compared to the 6th edition, but I wanted to bring these both out so we could compare and contrast the components and what has changed and what has stayed the same. So let's get this open. All right, opening this massive box, the first thing we see in here is what is this? The Operational Methods, the sequel to War and Peace. So this is a booklet that kind of shows you what the sort of historical maneuver is of various Napoleonic corps in formation as they would march to their particular objectives. This booklet shows you all the different ways that you can sort of maneuver your forces to reflect sort of the historical maneuver. That booklet is also in this game as well, but this one comes as a little pamphlet. We've got a gigantic bag of bags, which I probably the easiest way to store this game. Definitely with 6th edition, it was full of bags, and I organized them by nationality. A lot of them, they're just strength points. They come in denominations, infantry, cavalry, and so forth. But as you can see, that was my preferred method. We get 2 D6s in the 7th edition. We get a deck of cards, which is new to the game. These are like little event cards that sort of get added. I'm curious to see how these work. We have got the player aid, which is a triple fold out here. So here we've got the attrition and combat results table. It's a pretty interesting combat system in this game. You basically check your odds ratio, which can only be 2 to 1 or less. And then based on who has the larger or smaller force, you'll get different results based on what you roll on the dice. There are some modifiers, your morale rating of your units, your leaders that you have in the battle terrain. And there's an optional tactical matrix as well. But it's actually very simple and quick to resolve combat in this game. And you're not going to see these like devastating victories usually in the game. It's typically you have to resolve multiple combats to kind of like eliminate units. Here we see naval damage, naval results, the weather table. This is going to be useful for scenarios in which those things come into play. We've got the terrain effects chart. It doesn't look too much different from the last version of the game. And then on the other side, we've got the optional Grand Campaign combat results table. If you choose to play the game as a Grand Campaign, which is not really recommended. This is more of a scenario game than it is a Grand Campaign. It reminds me of Pacific War in that way. There is a Grand Campaign if you want to try and play the entire Napoleonic Wars, but from what I understand, it doesn't really hold together very well. But there is some optional stuff for that. Here's the tactical matrix. So if you choose to use a tactics chit, it's kind of like Battles of the American Revolution. You choose a tactics chit, you cross-reference with the tactics of the opponent, and then you get some potential die roll modifiers. Here's the campaign game turn sequence. Here's the regular sequence of play for the game, and here's the Grand Campaign chronology for different events that happen while you're playing it. And then on this side, optional tactical matrix for field battles, the regular turn sequence, the force march table, the combat sequence, and the combat loss charts. So I think you'll probably get 2 of these in here. Let's see, we've got another fold out, and this is the force pool display. So you keep your prisoners of war if Napoleon's in exile. Italian minor states here. I guess you'll keep all the units on this. I believe that was in... Yeah, so these are more similar to what was in this edition here. So you've got the leader display, and you can keep your forces in the leader display and put your leader on the map so the map isn't too cluttered. Although this isn't a very counter-intensive game anyway. It's pretty low density. Here's the French allies, the Austrians, the Prussians, the Spanish... Here is the, we can open it, here's the Allies leader display. So we've got, again, got the British, got the Austrians, the Prussians, the Russians, the Spanish, the Ottomans. So they do have the Egyptian campaign in here. I've never played that scenario. Here is a booklet that is just the Grand Campaign scenario. And so this is everything you need to play if you want to try and play the whole thing as a Grand Campaign. How minor states are created. There's a whole lot more to this Grand Campaign if you want to play it that way. Here are the standard game scenarios. So this game does include the early Italian campaigns, the campaign in Egypt, the Marengo campaign, Austerlitz. I have played most of these first four. I don't think I've done Egypt, but I've done the other three. We've got the 1806 and 07 campaigns against in Poland, in Prussia, Wagram. We've got the Russian campaign here, Struggle of Nations, Return from Russia, Napoleon at Bay, the Waterloo campaign, and then you've got a Peninsular War game, which is very long and is just the conflict in Spain and Portugal, and then we've got just Spain here in the final 4 years of that, and then you've got the final 2 years of the Napoleonic era there. So most of these, I think, are in the 6th edition, but there are some new scenarios in this game, and we'll go through that. So here you've got just an introduction, how you set up, and a lot of this looks very similar to the last edition. Here are the rules. Not a very complicated game. There's some optional rules at the back, but I think the rules all told, are 17 pages. Most of these are not very involved. Like the combat is pretty simple. It's kind of cool because you can get, if you have cores close enough to each other when you're in combat, you can have like sort of other forces nearby march into the combat. So what starts as a small combat can balloon into like a giant engagement, which is kind of cool. But again, not a very complicated game. Pretty simple to play. Here is, what is this? A Soul for War and Peace. So this is optional random event cards for the scenarios and campaigns. So we saw that this deck, this tells you how to use these. That's cool. I think that's a pretty neat touch, it seems like. The random events deck. 54 standard playing cards in 4 suits of 13 cards and a pair of jokers. The black ones are only used in the campaign. The reds are commons and may be used in both the campaign and the scenarios, provided all players agree. So that's pretty cool. How you draw an Empire card, what happens when a card is drawn. So it looks like some ways to instigate their effects. And then we have a card manifest in here. Tells you what all the cards do, some rules, considerations around them. And then we've got some bonus scenarios. So let's take a look at this. A whole group of bonus scenarios, actually, which is really cool. So we've got 1792 in Poland. I think that features the Russians as well. Yeah, so Russia versus the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. That's pretty interesting. You don't really see this a lot in Napoleonic games, but it is taking place there. We've got La Marseillaise. We've got Sambre et Meuse. So we've got a lot of the early revolutionary campaigns in this 7th edition, which is pretty nice. We've got the Italian and German campaigns of 96. We've got Suvorov's campaign of 99. And then some very specific Spanish campaigns, Talavera, Coruña, Torres Vedras, Fuentes de Oñoro, and Albuera. And then some late Spanish Peninsular War stuff, Wellington's victory. So that's pretty cool. They break out the Peninsular campaign scenarios into like individual years, which is pretty cool if you want to play smaller chunks of those. But some really interesting stuff here, especially in the early revolutionary period that are not in the core game. So that's pretty awesome that you get a whole boatload of new scenarios to play through. And, conceivably you could play through each scenario, chronologically and get a really good sense of the historical sweep of the Napoleonic Wars, even if you don't play the Grand Campaign. A lot of these scenarios can be played pretty quickly, actually. I've done the Austerlitz scenario in one sitting. A lot of the early Italian scenarios can be done in just a couple of hours. All right, then we've got a stack of counters, and this is where I really want to compare the versions because we've got what look to be different but similar counters, and then we've got the maps, and these sit at the bottom of the box. Let's see if I can get these out of here without breaking them. These are chunky. My goodness, these are going to be huge on the table. So let's take a look. So here are the first couple of counter sheets. We've got some French strength points here, some French guards, some French cavalry. We've got the Austrians and some of their minor power allies. Looks like Piedmont there, some Austrian cavalry, some Austrian infantry. Strength points, a lot of Austrians. I did want to give you a comparison. So here we have some Austrian infantry. And it looks like there might be some new art here on the 7th edition. Looks like the pose is a little different. And then I want to show you the individual counters. So we'll punch out this. So here is, if I get in close, here's the difference between the two. So it looks like we've got sort of a more illustrated style in the 6th edition, a little bit more of a photorealistic style in the 7th edition. Functionally the same, basically the same size. Obviously you can see that the 7th edition has rounded counters. That's a pretty nice touch, a pretty nice premium feel to that. But overall, generally very similar. Here is a bag of Austrians, and I'm sure I'm going to make a bag of Austrians from this as well. And these punch pretty nicely. These are, the counters here from the last Avalon Digital game I had are quite nice. So looks like the same number of counters across all of the different nationalities. Let me see what I can do. We've got French, some ships on there. We've got the English, some French leaders. Actually, the one thing I do want to do is look at the leader portraits. So if we look here, here is the 6th edition portrait of Soult and Lannes. And here we have Soult, so you can see a little bit more historical flavor there, perhaps taken from painting. Here's Lannes. Lannes looks pretty similar, actually. Same pose, but again, more of a illustrated look, more of a photorealistic look. So, I mean, it's really minor, right? It's really mostly cosmetic difference. Here are some more British and Prussians, it looks like. More Prussians, Russians in green, Spanish in yellow, Ottomans in orange. We've got these look like more French Reserve, it looks like. Jourdan, we've got some Poles in here. We've got York. This would be, I don't know what power that is. The Red Heart, not quite sure. Russian leaders down here. Then we've got game markers. These are all going to be pretty much the same. If I show you, here's the disorganized or demoralized markers, basically the same art. Trenches, forts, turns besieged. Sieging is obviously plays a big part during this period. A bunch of national markers, alliance markers for the Grand Campaign, and so forth. So you get, looks like 10 or so counter sheets of rounded individual punch counters. Very nice. And now I want to look at the map. So it is a 2-map game. There's a west map and an east map of Europe. But here we can see an example of some of the terrain. Here's the Iberian Peninsula. National borders, cities, bridges, rivers, mountains, all the stuff you would expect. These are sort of 22 by 34 maps. We've got the War and Peace turn record track up there. This is the 7th edition map. Basically contains England up to sort of like the Midlands, Denmark here, and then in the east it goes all the way to Russia. Here we can see Paris, the capital, some of the towns. I forget exactly what the red towns are versus the black towns, but this is what the map looks like. Now let me grab the 6th edition map, same side, and I'll show you, see if there's any differences. So here we have the 6th edition map of Spain. Here we have the 7th edition map of Spain. And really, the only kind of difference that I can see is the color palette. This one is a little bit darker, a little bit more earth tone. This one is a little bit more pastel color, a little bit higher contrast with the text and some of that stuff. But in general, the fonts are generally the same. I mean, this could easily just be like the difference in like the color printing. Although I will say the textures on the 7th edition map are a lot less than on the 6th edition map. A lot more high contrast textures on this one than there are on this one. You can see with the mountains, for example. This one just a little bit more flattened. But in general, the style, the fonts, all of that is the same. It looks like it was just very mild touch-ups. The 7th edition has colored the non-playable areas a different color than the 6th edition, but in general, very, very similar. Even down to the United States at War Box being essentially the same. So you're not talking about huge differences here. You're talking, very small, subtle things. I think even as far as like the rivers go, they're all in the same spot. So you're really getting the same game here. It's just if you haven't had a chance to pick up the 6th edition, the 7th edition comes with some bonus stuff. So is there any reason to own the 7th edition if you already own the 6th edition? Well, this is where we talk about the update kit. So Avalon Digital is selling an update kit for 6th edition, and interestingly, they're using the One Small Step logo on this. Probably got permission of that. So you do get the bonus scenarios in the upgrade kit. So all of those extra scenarios that come in 7th edition, you'll get the booklet for that. You will get the deck of event cards for 6th edition if you choose to buy the update kit, and you will get some extra counters. Now, the weird thing about these counters is that they are not the same size as the original. They're very close. They're just slightly smaller. So you can see here, here's a 6th edition counter. Here's a 7th edition upgrade kit counter. They're pre-rounded, so they're not going to be like these. They're about the same thickness, and you're just going to get some extra ones so that you can play the early scenarios found in this booklet. So if you have the 6th edition, you basically have this game, and then you can buy the update kit, and you'll essentially have a fully compatible 7th edition War and Peace, it looks like. You know, I haven't checked some of the fine details. I don't think there's any rules changes between the editions. I think it's all pretty much the same game. Now, the reason that I have both is that way back when, I was like, well, I don't need the 7th edition. I just need the new 6th edition, or the new 7th edition stuff to add to my 6th edition, and I bought the upgrade kit. And then a whole bunch of time went by, and I completely forgot. And then I was like, oh, there's a 7th edition of War and Peace. I should pick that up. So that is why I have both, but it has allowed me to do this compare and contrast for you. It is nice that this game is now back to being available. It is a classic. I do enjoy it. I think it's a really fun game. If you like sort of a larger scale Napoleonic game, Hex Encounter that has a lot of different scenarios to play through the era. It's a pretty interesting design. You know, it has its detractors, but I do think I enjoy it quite a bit. And I'm happy now that I own both. And maybe I'll put my 6th edition up for sale with the update kit so someone else can enjoy it. So there you go. War and Peace.